Amanda, what's up?
Hi,
What's up,
Amy.
Peter?
Hi, Peter.
Happy
We
Saturday.
are beautiful Saturday in Oregon. Yeah. Yes.
Are we
Amanda
all
and I
on?
are very happy to have Peter Joshua Kilolani Wolf today. He is from Medford, Oregon, Rogue Wolf Training. Peter is a strength and movement-based coach and Tai Chi teacher. He is a certified personal trainer in several modalities, including TRX, Scott Pilates, kickboxing from Body Training Systems, is a Strong First certified instructor in kettlebells, barbell, and body weight. He's also certified in the flexible steel system. That's one of Strong First system partners, and an Indian Club flexible steel instructor. And I did some Indian Club training with Peter last summer. It was really fun. Yes, I'm still practicing. I hope that we can get going again on that at some point. It was awesome. He has a great story and background. We're very excited to have him with us today. So welcome, Peter.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yes. Well, so tell us we'd like to hear about your background. You have a very interesting story, but first, what are you doing right now as far as training your clients? Talk a little bit about Rogue training, Rogue Wolf training.
Now is in the right now with everything being shut down in Oregon. It's Zoom, one-on-one meetings. A lot of my students are retirement age, and so Zoom is challenging for some, the technological stuff. So FaceTime, anything that works really. A lot of my business is local, and so it's kind of strange now to go online with everything. And to actually have new students at this kind of time is strange, but the new students are not local. So what I'm doing now is some online classes through some mutual friends, Empowered Strength in Bend, Oregon. I'm teaching a class there. And then there's a yoga studio I work for who was able to turn around pretty quickly to produce online courses. And so we're actually about 3 weeks into that. I teach 6 classes a week for Rasa Yoga Center. Rasa Yoga Center in Medford, Oregon, but anybody can sign up for classes, and that is Indian clubs. I teach some of that through Rasa. I call the class Anti-Fragile, and it is a non-denominational mix of some of the flexible steel stuff, yoga, and other martial arts, mostly body weight, and then the Indian club is our tool. We use some like leverage stuff with like a yoga block, but it's mostly body weight in the Indian club. Then the other class I teach for Rasa 3 times a week through Zoom is a Tai Chi class. And that is also a bit non-denominational. I'm feeling that's going to be a reoccurring theme in the talk today. Is like a lot of different modalities I teach I feel like they go together. I can make them go together like a fried rice dish kind of thing. And so it makes it a little harder sometimes to market the thing, but yeah, I'm teaching Tai Chi. That's a mixture of a lot of different styles. So we go down that rabbit hole of martial arts and Kung Fu. There's a lot of, and it's not that different today in the fitness industry either. Like the branding of stuff sometimes gets in the way of actually like delivering the goods. But so I'm teaching Anti-Fragile bodyweight class Tai Chi, which is maybe a little more on the restorative side of the spectrum, where the Anti-Fragile class is probably going to be a little more challenging, a little more vigorous. And then Yin Yoga. And Yin Yoga is another kind of marketing term, but it's the softer side of yoga. So if you already think yoga is soft, there's a softer side in the Yin Yoga that's really a lot like some of Pavel's ideas. Maybe we'll get into that too, like relax into stretch. Some of his earlier works are very, very similar to what's popularly called Yin Yoga now. And so I teach that as well.
Awesome. So Amanda and I were texting this morning, and she said she was doing yoga. How'd that go, Amanda?
Oh my gosh.
And does Yin Yoga sound good?
I know that I need it now. I mean, I have a very good friend who teaches it here, and I was like, well, I've got a little extra time now, so I'm going to start doing her virtual classes. And oh my gosh, I'm so tight. I mean, so that's obviously what I need.
Yeah, virtual could be good. You know, in my opinion, the best way, I'm probably 14 years into being a yoga instructor, and I really think the best way to do yoga is one-on-one. And that's a plus a little bit in the Zoom is like it feels a little bit like one-on-one, even if you got 12 students, you can, you feel like you have that focus of the person. But I always had a little concern, like teaching like 24 people at a time in a yoga class, that you can't really correct or check form or anything very easily in a big class like that. So yeah, if you got a friend or you know somebody, that kind of way to distribute or deliver the knowledge is pretty cool. This is the time for that, for stuff that's a little, you don't need a lot of space for. Maybe you can even get outside and do. Some of my students are taking their classes outdoors with the online stuff. So what was the focus of your yoga? Did it flow like between positions, or vinyasa, or did you all the time? Yeah.
Yes. She focused on breathing a lot, probably because she knew that that's what I needed. I mean, she had several people in that class, but I turned my camera off because I was like, this is going to be embarrassing. I mean, I just lift heavy stuff. That's it, you know, and I put it back down, and I just knew that this was going to be really hard for me. But yeah, it flowed really well for everyone else from what I could see.
Well, the yin yoga is pretty different. There's no flowing going on. You are in a position for maybe even 3 to 5 or 5 to 7 minutes without moving.
Okay.
So it's can be a tricky one to market. It's not the most exciting kind of yoga, and there's not that much to say either as an instructor. Once you get someone into position and they're starting to melt into it, you know, I have some things I give people to focus on and let their attention move a little bit, but it's pretty different. The yin yoga, it's more, you can do a lot of the breath work, you can do a lot of the meditation work. It's not necessarily going to be like a lot of muscular stretching, and it definitely is not strength in the muscular sense. I think what you're strengthening when you do these longer holds is more your connecting tissue, your joints, you're stressing a little bit, different kind of tissue. But I've, you know, found a lot of use in both, especially if your training is kind of a, you know, bilateral, heavy, getting all the splitting apart of the tissues in yoga is great, a little combo. See, I came from the opposite end as all body weight. So I can tell my yoga story is I got into martial arts about 8, 9 years old, and it was because the neighbor at my house, his mom would drive us to baseball practice or basketball, whatever we were doing, we had to ride share in the neighborhood. And so when he switched and decided he was going to do martial arts, that basically meant like I had to too, when the best friend did. My parents had just got divorced, and there was no ride. There was nowhere to get to the activity. So, okay, we're doing martial arts. And so I started doing that like 3 times a week, and was really inflexible, like very below the curve. We had the presidential fitness exam going on then. This is like 88. You guys ever do that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
There's a sit and reach test with the wooden block and pull up or flexed arm hang, puddle run, mile run. Yeah. So I was very low on all of those things, like, and I was aware of it. Like it was not good. And so with martial arts, it brought it out even a little more, to not be able to kick. Right. And worst of all, my neighbor, best friend, he could kick right to head height. Day one, like, oh, no problem. I can do the Van Damme kick in the air. And so what I was inspired to try to get more flexible, to be able to do stuff in the class that I wanted to do. And my mom had a 30 days to yoga book, black and white. You can still buy it. One of these like that had like no binder, so it would sit open when you opened it up. So 9 years old, I'm doing 30 days to yoga, and just did 30 days over and over and over again. I didn't have a way to go further. Southern Oregon, we're on the I-5, but we don't always get all the options of other areas. Maybe you feel the same sometimes on the coast. Mm-hmm. It takes a little longer for the next craze to get to you. And so there wasn't very many options for yoga. Like 4 years later, I finally took my first class in high school at the YMCA. But I was into self-study pretty early. I would bring my little 30 days of yoga book to sleepovers. I was considered a weirdo that way, but it worked. I got more flexible for martial arts by way of the yoga, and that was my entry point. I didn't consider teaching it at all. I was already a personal trainer for probably 3 or 4 years, before that kind of opportunity opened up to teach it to groups. So for me, yoga has just been kind of it's been a lifestyle thing for a long, long time. Dabbled in going deeper, like vegetarian and more of the meditative practices when I got into college. But right now, my own yoga practice is just the yin. Teaching the flow stuff that you're talking about, like it's too much. It's too much when combined with the kettlebells and the jujitsu, like the other stuff that I do that is stressful, and it overloads. I was noticing that I was really getting overloaded and feeling like I was getting like tissue damage from doing so much yoga. I was at one point teaching it like 4 or 5 times a week and then doing my own stuff. So that's was a hard balance. And so now I only teach the yin because I don't have to actually move it really in any way when I teach it. There's not really correction so much in yin. You just use support, bolsters the floor so that you're not in a dangerous position in any way. But there's no standing postures really in yin, for example. Like you're always muscularly passive is the goal. And so that works for me now teaching yoga. But the entry point was definitely was martial arts.
Cool. You've been doing that since you were 9, is that right?
About 9 years old, yeah. It was right then when my parents split, and again, like the neighbor, my best friend, was doing martial arts, so we're going to do martial arts, and that was a combination class, which probably influences a lot my style now. The idea of combining things. It was Jeet Kune Do is the name for Bruce Lee's art, what he used, and the definition is way of the intercepting fist, but that's kind of irrelevant. His bigger postulation is, observe your own experience, like what you've been through, your training, and then decide what's useful and what's not so useful, and don't do the not useful stuff, and not slave to tradition or a brand kind of thing. And so that was kind of hammered into me by my first martial arts coach. He was a police sergeant and really good kids classes and adults classes, and it was a good way to get started. Couple of years into that, because he had a full-time job as a police officer, it was hard to juggle both. And so the kids class got dropped after about 2 or 3 years in, and that could have been the end of martial arts for me. But for me and for my neighbor best friend, he decided, like, okay, you guys are really into it, I'll let you do the adults class. And so we're about 12 years old into adults class, and that was a big that was a difference maker. Getting to choke out adults is much more fun than just sparring with other kids. That boosted confidence a lot and got me just more comfortable with martial arts generally. That was a good tipping point. So that was my main thing in high school and everything was martial arts. Did a little bit of basketball, tennis, soccer, but for sure martial arts was the driver into getting into physical culture. Anything around this stuff for me has always been the martial arts lens.
Yeah. And is that what took you to China?
It was, yeah. So a longer story, a different story. You guys ever watch the X-Files? That was pretty big, early 90s. Really liked the X-Files. Going into college, I thought that I could be a FBI agent, would be the plan. And so my major at the time was psychology, pre-law, was going to, there was a recruiter at the University of Oregon, and I was saying that the number one was like learning Arabic languages in the 90s, and Chinese was number 2, or maybe it was vice versa, like for getting hired, right? So I'm like, okay, perfect. And I was still doing martial arts. So Jeet Kune Do is non-dominational. Bruce Lee's art, they do a little bit of everything. Take it from Filipino martial arts, maybe something from Chinese martial arts, Western boxing, fencing, you name it. So when I got to the University of Oregon, I thought I was already pretty good martial artist as a freshman. I'm 8 years into it. And I took the Jeet Kune Do class you could take there. And it was pretty basic, and I got invited to be like an assistant instructor. I'm like, this is cool, but it's not challenging. Like, I'm not being challenged. I'm now like teaching. And so what I saw was a poster in my dormitory. It said, do you want to be like Jet Li? And it was a poster. Do you guys know who Jet Li is?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I had no idea. Who he was. but he was in a really cool Kung Fu pose in the picture. So it looks like, you want to be like Jet Li? And I said, yeah, okay, I do. And so I started going to Wushu, which is Chinese martial arts class. And it's a sport. It's been a sport in China since like 1949. And so it's not just a martial art, it's a sport. And it's a bit like gymnastics. There's different events and implements. So there's a fighting part where you wear gloves and stuff. And then there's also more of a gymnastics, like acrobatic element where you perform a form. And what I found was, I was not good. Again, it was that same experience as the very first martial art. Whoa, I'm really not good at this. And thinking that I was, walking into it. And also the workout was so hard. It was like 2 hours and 15 minutes and brutal stretching and just piles of sweat. And like, we weren't doing everything right, for sure, in retrospect. We were not training correctly necessarily, but we were training very, very hard. And so that changed my perspective, and I got into Chinese martial arts and the sport aspect and competing, which is not necessarily a part of Jeet Kune Do. Like doing competitions and stuff it's not necessarily like an emphasized part of Jeet Kune Do necessarily. So that was pretty different. And that's what ended up partly getting me to China. As I went in 1999 to learn language. And the plan was to be there for just 3 months in Beijing. 3 months turned into the better part of 3 years. And after 3 months of doing at the language university, I was at a university specifically for language in China and in Beijing. Like, it's not so much like a college is going to have all kinds of different courses to take. There's a little, like we've got, technological university, science university, university of physical education, language university. So I was at a language university for 3 months, and 8 to 12 was Chinese language. But then in the afternoon, I would hire privately martial arts instructors. Because the dollar was like 8 to 1. $1 went to 8 renminbi. So your money went really far for like personal training. Like if you could, what I would tell people is like in our kettlebell world, it's like if you could just hire Pavel for a couple hours privately, like that's what I could do. I could hire the best martial arts instructors for very reasonable price. And so I was doing a lot of that. And my instructors were like, hey, if you're going to do this all the time, you're at the wrong school. You should be going to the University of Physical Education, 30 minutes away here. And so I dropped out and I switched, and they had a 2-year program for foreigners. And it's a little bit like becoming a PE teacher, would have been the degree that I have from the University of Physical Education in Beijing, but with an emphasis on martial arts. And so every term we would have a different focus. Could be Tai Chi, could be the kickboxing, could be swords. Like we would have a different thing over the 2 years that we're focused on. And then your exams were performing, like you had to compete against other students for your exams. And if you finished at a certain percentage, then you passed, you got to the next level. And so I was doing that for a while. That got me to China. Interestingly, when I left China, it was during SARS. I'm getting a lot of triggers and flashbacks a little bit with what we're going through now. That was the first SARS was in into 2002, 2003. 2003, all the schools got shut down in Beijing, and very similar kind of quarantine thing.
You've already experienced this.
Yeah, I was listening to Karen's your podcast with Karen, and she was talking about like the LA airport being empty. Same, it was 2003, leaving Beijing, nobody, in a huge airport, and so I got like my temperature taken like 6 times and my bag searched like 7 times because they had nothing to do. There was all the airport staff had absolutely nothing to do. So we're just gonna search your bag again, thanks. And that was a weird experience. I didn't leave as early as a lot of foreign students did. I stayed during the SARS for a couple of reasons. But everything had been shut down. There was like, I couldn't really take any more classes and stuff. So I'm like, okay, it's time to go home. I might have ended up in China for a lot more years. But in 2003, right before SARS was really hitting big, I blew out my knee in training. and I did the triad. I tore my ACL, MCL, and lateral meniscus, and no health insurance and no connections or anything to rehab. So I was trying to rehab on my own and not really knowing actually how much damage I had done. That was part of the reason to come back as well in 2003.
Great.
And did you go back to the University of Oregon at that point, or?
I'd already finished at University of Oregon.
Okay.
I graduated from U of O in 2000, and the 99-2000 year, I was on a program through the University of Oregon to study the language. And so I don't know how it works exactly now, 17 years later, but the way it worked then is you had to pay the university cost, right? U of O price, and addition more to go to do the overseas class. And one of the things I found out after being there for 3 months is that you also could pay the Chinese university directly, right? Skip the middleman. And that also was about 1/15 the price. So my tuition at the university, at the Beijing University of Physical Education, was around $1,200 to go to take.
Wow.
Yeah. It's different now, but so what was funny is that a U.S. university won't give you credit essentially unless you pay the U.S. university price, right? Same class, same teachers, same thing, but that extra $15,000 is what it would have taken to get like credit at U of O. So I did go home in 2000, and I finished up like my last term of U of O, and have a bachelor's. And exercise science is what I was doing the most my last couple of years. Started out psychology, pre-law. I also attended University of Law School 1 year. The loans from that 1 year add up to the whole 5 years of undergrad before that. But that was the FBI path, martial arts, Chinese language, pre-law, psychology. I thought I could be a Mulder from X-Files. Obsessed with martial arts and competing that really derailed it. And I was doing college level competitions that time. I was a collegiate national champion in 2000, and then I was a national champion in forms competition like in 2001. I was popping back between 99 and 2003 to your visa could only be for 1 year, student visa. So I would have to come back and get renewed, and I'd come back and do some tournaments, and I'd like frame houses or work in a mill, make some money to get a ticket and go back to school because school was so cheap. That was the focus was all competitions. When I blew out my knee and I came back, that's when I pursued being a personal trainer. Was towards the end, right around 2002, 2003. And I also met my wife at the time during SARS in Beijing. She was also on a program through the University of Irvine to study language. And so I kind of I followed her when I got back to the US. Stayed in Oregon for a while, tried to rehab my knee and get a personal training credential. And then I got a job at the University of Irvine where she was an undergraduate. And so was doing that for a couple years. And it was really cool to work for a university. UCI had like the best campus, best equipment, access to all kinds of awesome stuff. Like it was a really good job, except for the money. But I could ride my bike to work in Southern California a full year, work for a couple hours, and then go swim and go back to work. It was pretty cool, but there just wasn't a lot of high paid work. I think in that kind of stuff, you really have to pay your dues and work your way up the chain. And I was way low on the ladder. So I also started working at 24-Hour Fitness in Irvine at the time. And that did make money. It's much easier to sell personal training in Southern California than it is in Oregon. Yeah. So that made me think, like my first 3 months at 24-Hour Fitness, I thought I was an all-star because it was so easy to sell. And maybe it's like that in the car industry too, in different markets, like way easier to sell cars in.
Yeah, a lot of it's population.
Sure. Okay, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, California, yeah, population and economics, and then the sun's out the whole time, right? You're going to be in all year round. In Oregon, it's like, okay, about April, May, then the jackets come off and people are concerned about their fitness again because they're going to be seen out of their coats. But in Southern California, it just seemed, relative. It was easier to sell. And so I was successful there at 24 Hour Fitness, and I became a manager at 24 Hour Fitness. And I did that for a couple years. When my wife, girlfriend at the time, when she got to grad school, she went to Berkeley. And so I followed her up to Berkeley, and I became the manager of the 24 Hour Fitness on Berkeley in Addison for a couple years. And a couple fun stories that relate to Strong First out of that experience. Would not go back to working for a big gym like that. It was mostly sales is what it felt like, when I was there. They had a thing called an active manager. So you trained 100 to 120 hours of personal training in a month, which is pretty, felt like a lot of work.
Yeah.
And then also the manager of about 5 other trainers. And so that was a good experience to hire and fire and train people. 2 of my first hires in 2005 are Strong First now. At the time, they were undergrads in college. So Ruben Williams, he's a Strong First instructor and beast tamer in Atlanta. And Mark Jellingson, he's in San Francisco still and doing some big things in training. So they were both, what I would do, my trick at 24 Hour Fitness in Berkeley is it's right next to the university. Like you could walk 2 blocks to the university. I hired track and field athletes because they needed part-time jobs and they could sell training. You just look at them like, yep, I want to train with that guy. These guys were trying out for the they were looking to do the 2006 summer. Maybe my years are off, but they were like Olympic potential guys. Ruben Williams, Mark Jellingson. Mark Jellingson was a decathlete, and Ruben was like shot put and stuff. And so I hired them, but they actually taught me like so much stuff. Like Ruben taught me how to do cleans, and Mark was teaching me like barbell stuff. They were, it was cool. We had a neat team, even though it was mostly sales. We had a lot of good, it felt like I had a good team at different years. But after school was over for my wife, there wasn't a good reason for us to be in Berkeley. We're living in Emeryville, and I don't know what it is now, again, 14, 15 years later, but you were paying $1,300 for a tiny studio apartment. And I didn't see, like, how do we get to family? How do we get to a house? How do we get to kids? So went back to Southern Oregon, went back to roots, so to speak. Technically, my roots are, I was born in Hawaii, and so was my wife. It's the weird little connection we have.
Yeah.
That's the Kilolani. That's because I have Hawaiian grandparents, and they got to pick the middle name, I don't know, the Catholic thing or something, but that's why I got the multiple middle name, 2 names, and pass that on to my kids now too, because I remember the trauma of having to learn to spell all of that. I wanted to share. So my kids are Oliver Hazard Wong Wolf and Beatrix May Lee Wolf. We'll see how they do with spelling their whole names. But Kilolani with all those, that was hard. It's hard to learn.
Very cool. Amanda and I, my husband Matt, and you met Matt when we were at the MACE training. So we went to Hawaii, and Amanda joined us this last January. And my grandmother was born in Hawaii, actually. So.
What island?
Oahu. Her dad was in the Navy. She was a Pearl Harbor survivor. She was about 14 when the event happened, and was a USO girl, and so my family has a lot of history there, and we love to go back to the islands whenever we have the chance.
Any tie or any excuse to go is awesome. My wife's dad was in the Navy, similar. So he's got an interesting story. He's from the Philippines and lied about his age to join the Navy, so he could get in early and get out. And so he joined the U.S. Navy after being stationed in the Philippines, then Taiwan, where he met his wife, my wife's mother, and they married and then moved to Southern California, or moved to Hawaii, I guess, first. He was stationed in Hawaii first. My dad was a physical therapist, and so he worked in Kauai, Lahui, for years. And then I came along, and then when my younger brother came along, then they moved. We left Hawaii when I was about 4 years old, 4 years old, and ended up in Southern Oregon since. You know, say hi, guys. These guys are itching to get in on the screens. Favorite thing is to focus.
Hi, Oliver.
Hi.
Culturists. Oliver deadlifts and swings kettlebells and Indian clubs, and Beatrix does gymnastics and ballet and kettlebells and Indian clubs. Huh? You want to say hi, Beatrix? Oh,
hi, Beatrix.
Hi.
A ship. Virginia, my wife's dad, suggested that we pick a name after one of the naval ships, and so Oliver Hazard Perry is a famous naval officer.
Wait, Perry?
Well, that's his last name. Your last name's Wolf, but Oliver might know the whole story of where his name comes from. But the Battle of Lake Erie is where he's famous from.
Oh.
And Beatrix is named after Beatrix Kiddo from Kill Bill. Uma Thurman's.
That's awesome.
So they know the stories behind their names yet, but it'll be fun to.
Maybe he does know the Beatrix thing.
Kiddo, Beatrix, she knows a little bit, huh?
She might need to do some martial arts then.
Yes. You'll probably see if you follow me on Instagram, Rogue Wolf Training. You'll see her doing some jump kicks and stuff on there once in a while. Yeah, they both enjoy their martial arts. Right now, it's that's one of the hard hits of what we're shutting everything down. Is like they love her gymnastics. Her best friends are in there, and ballet, and Beatrix. No. And Oliver does soccer and jiu-jitsu, and you know they're missing all their activities right now, and they've got Pop to be a teacher, which I don't think anybody's loving that right this minute for school work. But yeah, it'll be a long couple months, I think, trying to do homeschooling for them. They're almost 8 and 6 years old.
Yeah. Great ages, fun ages.
Yes, lots of fun, very active. There's it's just 2 people. Yeah. Oliver is learning about Zoom because he sees his teacher on Zoom now this week. And so he would like to do a private Zoom today with one of his friends. So we're going to see.
Yeah, you should do that. Get some practice.
Yep. And know more than me pretty soon about it.
Hey, Peter, I have a question for you. Are you involved with the K-3 combat systems?
Yes.
Are you teaching that? And is there a way that people can do that online at all? Because I'm really interested, was hoping to go to your workshop in Bend at Empowered Strength, but can't do it now. But so that's the Filipino, it's based on the Filipino martial arts, correct?
Yeah. So it's based on martial arts principles more generally.
Okay.
So one of the neat things about the Filipino martial arts is it was one of the last tested martial arts, like that a culture had to actually use it. When the Spanish was occupying the Philippines, the Filipinos were trying to fight back in kind of a guerrilla warfare way, and they were using traditional martial arts systems to do so. And so it was seen as very effective, even in a modern era. So when the U.S. got to the Philippines, I don't know if we already had Marines or what before there was Marines, they started using some of the tactics and learning some of the methods. And it's a real heavily weapons-based training. But K3 is a combination of a lot of different martial arts ideas from Dr. Mark Chang and it is using a lot of the JKD ideas, like Filipino martial arts is a big part of that, but also Chinese kickboxing and grappling arts combined with strength training concepts. So one of the Ks is Kali, that's the Filipino martial arts. One of the Ks is for kettlebell. Now, more broadly, it refers to the type of training we do in Strong First, not necessarily that you have to use a kettlebell. And similar with the Kali part, it doesn't necessarily refer that you learn how to cut people with knives, but you're going to use the concepts. So in K3, we would teach, for example, using the kettlebell language, like we're going to teach the hinge. We're going to work strong hinging. We're not necessarily going to do hundreds of kettlebell swings, right? We might hinge in different ways or swing different objects, but the principles are based around the kettlebell. And similar with the Kali, they have some interesting principles, like how to teach the weapons. One of the blanket terms is sinwali, which means weaving in Filipino. You're weaving back and forth your arms or your weapons and not cutting yourself. And so that's one of the other Ks. And then the kickboxing was the other K, open hand implements. Now what that kind of looks like is it looks like a little bit like our animal flow or ground force method kind of stuff sometimes. One of the big differences in K3 and what makes it a little hard right this minute, like what I've loved the best about it is the partner work, is reactive partner work. And so for a personal trainer, one-on-one or small group training, it's so stimulating. Like people are always got a smile on their face. And that was my experience in martial arts and coaching that first before being a personal trainer, is a lot of people are not comfortable with partner work, right? They don't want to be touched or swung at or have to react to somebody, right? But once you remove the threat, which is what K3 is awesome at, removing the threat, people love it. They like interacting and getting feedback and having the stimulation. So an example would be when I learned Kali, we learned with rattan sticks, the stick fighting. And if you got whacked on the knuckles one time, you might not come back to train again. That might be it. Or the eye. And so as a kid and trying to embrace that, like, leadership? Yeah. That kind of toughness element of martial arts, it was fine. But I'm probably not going to get Grandma Jones to start whacking the sticks, especially if she hits her knuckles once or twice. So K3 uses these padded sticks that still give you a bit of audio feedback. You get a feel, a little bit the vibration that you would get from hitting with a real implement, but the threat is gone. You're not going to hurt. You can hit over and over again. And so that same concept, but then do it with boxing, and then do it with kickboxing, and then do it even with kettlebells. And now for us, maybe we don't feel like there's a lot of threat with kettlebells, at least the way we teach it. But you've probably seen students who are intimidated by the kettle cannonball with handles. So that's what's neat about it. Removing the threat, keeping a stimulus-rich environment. Like you have to react and like you have to be involved. You can't really like check out totally. And a lot of people end up liking that a lot. So what Dr. Chang is trying to do right now is to try to develop an online version. I think he's working on it right now. So what I've been trying to do is promote it a lot. I've done workshops where I can that are just like a couple hours, introducing the concepts of the system, play around a little with the sticks, try to encourage people to go to Bunal, B-U-N-A-L, Bunal brand. They make all kinds of training equipment. The kids love it. They have like bigger boppers, little ones, big ones, smaller. But they make really high quality equipment. You can put in get a lot of mileage out of it. It won't break down. So yeah, I've been trying to do that and promote it as much as I can. There's only been a few opportunities to certify it with K3. I think I was at the first official one. And then there's been just New York and Austin, Texas since then. But I think you'll see a lot of that. Like it's my opinion that this is going to be the year for martial-based movement training and strength training, in the sense of not necessarily fighting. Like I like this version of the word martial art. That word wushu is the Chinese word for martial art. And you could see it, you could translate it as self-defense, or you could kind of flip it and say the defense of your self, right? Yourself in the sense of like your health, your mental well-being, your relationship with your family and your community. That's what you're defending. You're defending yourself in a bigger picture than just like an altercation, like fighting. And so that's what I like a lot about K3 and teaching those concepts. I can take anything that I've learned before from different martial arts styles, and I could actually put it under that same lens. Like, how can I make this a little less threatening to the student, but still keep it really engaging? And that's a fun game to try to play, to use that lens of the K3 on top of other things that I'm already doing. But to get more K3 right now, keep checking in with K3 Instagram, and they have a website, and there's a few videos and how-tos you can get off of there now, but I think there's a lot more coming, and I'd love to be involved in that, but it's not sure yet, you know, how much.
Cool. Well, we'll look it up, and I'm going to make sure that on all of these sites that you've mentioned today, I'll put them in the notes on this podcast too, so people will be able to look these up.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
Meet the overlap of things. You know, Dr. Chang is also JKD instructor. He's further along in those martial arts. But what's funny, you know, is seeing, I have a lot of this in my Strong First world. People who are my mentors, like the relationships flips a lot, right? The student mentor relationship back and forth. Just had a lot of those kind of experiences. I mentioned Ruben Williams, Mark Jellingson, some of the trainers I had hired like 2005, and like I come around 2013, I was at my Strong First Level 1 in Vancouver. At the time, it was hard to even get, I think Strong First was just becoming Strong First, and it was hard to find any certifications on the West Coast at all. Now, you know, Portland and California are showing, you can get more chances. But so I had to go to Canada, and there was, and Mark was there. Mark has a super thick Boston accent, and he came up to me like, whoa, I hadn't seen him in 8 years, you know, since Berkeley. And he'd grown so much as a trainer. Same with Ruben, like, wow, you guys are ahead of me now in this Strong First world when I was hiring you not so long ago as trainers. So that was a cool kind of flipping relationship. And similar with Mark is, you know, I was training JKD in the 80s, late 80s, well before he was studying those arts. And now fast forward 2020, he's far, far ahead in those arts. We get in these little, you know, your path veers off of where you think it was going to go. And then you come back around again and see like, oh no, those things do work together. They weren't mutually exclusive. To be a health professional, but also be martial artists, and like have that mix is neat. I dabbled a little bit in trying to do the destructive side of martial arts before kids. I did some cage fighting at the amateur level in 2009. And right now it's just much more fulfilling to do the wellness side of things. Maybe that'll change over time, but yeah, right now that's what's most interesting to me, is kind of sharing the wellness side of it. But I think this year is a year where people are really going to be interested in martial movement, martial principles. It's what drew me to Strong First. The language, it sounds a lot like martial arts. And
well, I really love the way when we were working together with the Indian clubs, you incorporated a little bit of martial movement. You know, I learned the basic 1 and 2 patterns, and then you had me incorporate some stepping that had a martial influence, and it made it, you know, totally different, more challenging, but fun.
Nice.
It was really interesting. I like it. I still do it, you know, and my club, I've barely done any training other than worked with you, and James had an online class for snake, and that's it. But it's enough to practice and just to keep things interesting and fun. And
nice.
So I highly recommend people look into Indian clubs if you haven't, because it's just a different style of training. You're not getting a workout so much as you're training your brain, and you're training, and then you're also getting some nice mobility work in there without realizing it. That's how I see it.
Yeah, you're getting, so when you want to work stronger, your connecting tissue and your joints, you really kind of need either a lot of time or a lot of reps. And how are you going to survive that? Like, how are you going to endure the lot of time or the lot of reps? It either needs to be fun, right? That would get you maybe to do a lot of reps. It needs to not hurt you too much, or either that, or you got to be kind of probably like one of us that likes to overtrain and does a little too much training. But for most people, like, they're not going to buy in to the lot of reps or a lot of time part if it's not fun, if it's not kind of stimulating and not hurting them too much. And so the Indian clubs check all those boxes. It's crazy as I go look deeper into the history of the Indian clubs, that something could be that popular and then just go away.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the late 1800s, Indian clubs would have been like one of the main kind of fitness tools, and then they almost completely disappear for a little bit, and then they come back. One of the authors I like to read a lot, author of The Black Swan,
Mm-hmm.
Asim Talib, I think is the name, and he writes about like predicting things, like how good we are at predicting things. And one of the best predictors of something being popular is if it was popular before, right? So Indian clubs were popular before. I think they will be really popular again. It's just you're competing with a lot bigger fight for attention for people. I guess there's something new, a new toy or new device every other day. For me, the Indian clubs are not really just the implement, though. It's the concepts, circular training, rhythmic training. Like you have to respond to natural movement, right? The clubs move a little bit based on physics, the same way as a kettlebell. It's the attractiveness of the kettlebell is it's moving by kind of natural law, as opposed to maybe an elliptical machine, which is trying to defy physics, right? To make me, if I can move more than what my body's actually capable of. I'll try not to get too heated, but my pet peeves are exercise machines in general that have a time and a place, but they're so expensive, and they can catch your eye. Some of these fancy machines. Working in a big gym, that was always what people were interested at the beginning of the new year, is like, what new machines do you have? Oh, that treadmill has a fan and an iPod connector. Yes, this is the best thing on the market. And just really frustrating to me, because you can do so many of the same movements. I can make an elliptical like movement or cross-country skiing movement with my Indian clubs and load it up with weights and make it intense. And it's still way more interesting for the brain than the elliptical machine. You're getting way more stimulus. And so that's one of my selling points. Cardio should be fun. It should be stimulating for your brain. There's probably a time and place for kind of a kind of cardiovascular effort that is not real stimulating that way. But for me, that's a hike. Go on a hike, go on do something that's, not even putting it in the fitness basket, but just a wellness kind of thing. But yeah, the machines are definitely a bit of a pet peeve for me, that part of the industry. Because when I was working for one of the big gyms that I did, I got to go to all the big trade shows for a couple of years, URSA, and the IDEA conference, like all the big ones. And what was telling to me is Strong First, you don't see them there. They're not at the trade shows trying to catch your attention with anything. They're not going to the IDEA conference. So after doing that for a couple of years, it just kind of felt like there was really cool people. I met a lot of really cool people and cool methods. That's how TRX, and got to see some of that stuff like right when it came out. But it just really felt much more hollow than what I was seeing coming out of like Strong First World and the connections I made out of those certifications. 3 days of nothing but kettlebell versus like a 90-minute seminar of like, okay, now you're a something instructor. You got it after doing the 2-hour IDEA conference. All right. I'm running a little low on power. How are we doing?
We're good. We've talked about 50 minutes, and this has been awesome, Peter. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Really fast. I mean, we could go on and on, but I understand you've probably got other things to do today.
Well,
but
not as much. It hasn't slowed down as much as I thought it might. I've probably slowed down about at least 1/3, not being able to go to a gym space or see my normal people, but partly because of the homeschooling and doing all the Zoom and online stuff and some of this fun stuff, it hasn't really slowed down. I can't say that life has slowed down exactly, but yeah, not as many appointments necessarily. You don't have to do things exactly the time someone else says. So it'll be a lazy Saturday, I hope.
Good.
get into stuff?
Well, I will. I do a little. I don't really edit at all. I mean, the whole conversation gets put out, but I do like to do a little write up, and there's just some stuff. So it'll be out either this afternoon or tomorrow. I think I actually might take advantage of the weather. We're having beautiful weather in Oregon today, Amanda.
We are too.
So I may get out.
Yeah.
Except for well, for you it might be warmer. For me, it's going to maybe get 60.
Right.
Yeah. So
We are the dry, sunny part of the state in Southern Oregon. People get the wrong. Yeah, sometimes not all of Oregon is wet all the time, but
no, where you are gets too hot for me in the summer for sure.
yeah, my wife. Oh, yeah, doesn't. That's not her favorite. July.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fun to be able to connect with all these different groups in the kettlebell world and performance, martial arts, and health practices. My niche for years and years has been local, and that's what I've tried to build is really strong local connections. So it's an interesting kind of new challenge to build these bigger connections, and the biggest, strongest like helping hand in that is my Strong First community. Not necessarily strong first business wise, right? But people like you guys, like John Oden, a lot of our familiar friends, that community is just like really neat about sharing stuff that we believe in, promoting each other on stuff has been pretty cool. So yeah, new era, new focus, but also more of the same.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and hopefully this will get the word out about you and about the things you're doing, and
I appreciate that.
and that's just what we're trying to do. Talk to our friends and see how we're all doing, and promote each other. So
checking in and promoting stuff that we believe in is one of the good things we can hang our hat on right now.
Yep. All right. Well, I am going to end the recording here. Everyone, have a great week, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, Peter.
Very much.
Thank you.